We're back with another episode of MacStories Unwind, and I'm John Voorhees. With me, of course, is Federico Vidici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am back in action, back home from WWDC, and, spending some time listening to some music, watching some movies, trying to unwind a little bit, which the show is all about, of course, to, get my head straight again and really start thinking about the summer and getting these reviews done in the fall, just kind of resetting everything, really.
Yeah. It's that's the plan, especially for the month of June. We have lighter operating systems this time around, I think. I mean, obviously there's Apple Intelligence coming out, but by and large, the things we cover in our fall reviews are, we talk a lot about the features and the design changes and the apps, and we're on the lighter side of things this year. So that's nice.
Yeah, we call it the lighter side of MacStories. I don't know. That's I'm working on a tagline. But before we get to our main unplugged topic, I did want to mention one thing that I have found very useful for coming back from WWDC, which I think is maybe applicable broadly for anyone who's kind of got some sort of event, whether it's at work or something more personal or whatever it happens to be, that's just kind of draining and wants to kind of bounce back from that as quickly as possible. I found it really helps just to take a full day off and do something totally different than what you've been doing. So what I did is I came back last Friday, and on Saturday, I drove 2.5 hours to Raleigh, North Carolina, where there was a retro gaming convention going on. It was an outdoor festival, really. And they had about 80 vendors. They had some really bad, cheesy bands playing in the background. I was kind of expecting chiptune music, but they didn't have that. They were just regular bands. And they had all kinds of games. They had all kinds of hardware. And I was looking around. I didn't actually pick up anything at the festival because looking at it, the prices weren't really particularly good. And there wasn't anything I was really thinking about buying unless I had the notion that I might pick up a Game Boy Color or a Game Boy Advance if I found a good deal, but I didn't really, so I didn't do that. But then I went to Limited Run Games, which some people may be familiar with, is an online retailer that does limited runs, like the name says, of games that are typically released digitally, but they make physical copies of them. And sometimes they're games that are current, sometimes they're like remakes or reissues of older games. But they have a store in North Carolina, their one and only retail store. And not only do they have kind of the inventory from their online store, but they're also a used game store too. So very big store, lots going on there. And it was just a nice way to kind of get away and unwind and relax after being at WWDC for a week.
Yeah, for me, that's that type of strategy is either going to the beach with my girlfriend and the dogs, or taking care of my plants and flowers outside, or taking a nice long walk in the neighborhood with my dogs. Especially now that I have my Meta Ray-Bans back from the UK with the prescription sunglasses, sunglass lenses in it. It's very nice. When there's a nice day, we wait until 5 p.m. when the heat, is not so bad as it is at lunchtime, for example. And we take we walk for a couple of hours. We go to the park and we take a walk around the block. It's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, those glasses take a lot better pictures than I was expecting. You've sent me a few, and they take pretty nice pictures, really. Well, Federico, I wanted to talk to you about something that has been on my mind, because when I went to WWDC, I had a number of people come up to me and say, is MacStories starting a podcast network? And it's actually something that had not really particularly occurred to me. I mean, we've obviously expanded the number of shows. We had 4, now we have 6. We also added Magic Rays of Light earlier in the year and Ruminate. So it really went from 2 to 4 to 6 pretty quickly over the span of a few months. And I got to thinking about it and why it is that I don't really consider it a podcast network and why it never has really occurred to me. And I think it's because I just see it as another part of MacStories. And maybe it's a semantics thing in a way, but I kind of feel like MacStories, when I say MacStories now, I don't mean MacStories the website. I mean MacStories, all the things we do. That's the website, that's the club, that's the podcast, the whole thing. And so I do view it as MacStories as like more of like a media company,
Yeah.
relatively small media company, but a media company nonetheless, doing a bunch of different kinds of publishing across different media, basically. And the podcasts aren't designed to be kind of like a standalone, self-sustaining network. They're designed to be part of an integrated whole. And I think you'll see over time that we're going to do more kind of doing stuff like that where it's integrated with the website and the club and everything. And we've already have. I mean, for instance, Sigmund Judge just wrote a great story for us just a couple of weeks ago about his Apple TV Go, which was a big subject on Magic Rays of Light just a couple of weeks ago. And he wrote a big story that did really well on the website too. It's that kind of, cross publication in different contexts that I think works really well for us and really makes it different than what I consider a traditional podcast network.
I think I have just a way to sum it up.
How's that?
For us and the kind of company that MacStories has become, because obviously it did not start this way, but the kind of company that you and I have turned MacStories into, for us, the podcast network is a feature, not a product.
Yeah, that's true. Very much like Dropbox, right?
Yeah, it's part of the many things we do. The website, the newsletter, the membership program, now a YouTube channel, and yes, a collection of podcasts. And I think the future we've been building toward is, and very much the kind of thing we're working on for the next version of MacStories is a nicer experience, bringing all these things together in a way that doesn't require you to say go to 5 different websites if you want to see all the things we do.
Right. It's going to be an integrated whole.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way to describe it. It's a media company with a bunch of different features. One of them, yes, I guess it's a podcast network, but it's always part of MacStories as a media company. And this we've been building this very much in the open over the past couple of years, especially. But yeah, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just an interesting tidbit from WWDC when people ask me, what's the deal with all the podcasts? So
yeah. Well, John, I have a pick for you
do?
this week.
What is that?
That is not a video game. It is not music. It is, and I am so happy that I can say this once again, a sitcom that I can watch to literally unwind before bed. Sylvia and I have been looking for this type of show for many months since all the previous sitcoms. We just love sitcoms. I think that this has been pretty much established. It is our favorite kind of TV to watch before we go to sleep. It's great to unwind and to be in a good mood, have a good laugh before you go to sleep. You sleep better. At least that's our theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, and I told you this on Unwind a few weeks ago, I think that nobody's making sitcoms anymore. At least that was my impression, because I did not do enough research. John, let me tell you all about The Neighborhood.
Okay.
So, first of all, Jennifer is going to love this if she's not familiar with it. So this is a sitcom on CBS. We're watching it on Paramount Plus, which I can use with a VPN on my Apple TV now, obviously. So The Neighborhood is a classic 20-minute length for each episode type of sitcom with a very particular twist. It tells the story about like what happens when just your friendliest white guy from the Midwest. I don't know, John, if this is a real place, Kalamazoo. I'm not sure.
It is. I used to drive by the. Yeah,
Really?
It's in Michigan. It used to be halfway between Chicago and Ann Arbor, where I grew up.
Okay, so what happens when the nicest guy from Kalamazoo relocates his family to a black neighborhood in Los Angeles where nobody looks like him and nobody likes his extra white guy ways? Even though he's a lovable guy, very friendly, very neighborly, but nobody likes him. What happens then? And so this show stars Cedric the Entertainer, excellent actor and stand-up comedian, in the role of Calvin Butler, the neighbor who already lives in Los Angeles. Max Greenfield in the role of Dave, the white guy from Kalamazoo. Max Greenfield I was familiar with before for his role as Schmidt in New Girl, which was an excellent comedy from a few years ago, and also stars Beth Burrs as Dave's wife, Gemma. Beth Burrs I knew from Two Broke Girls, also another CBS sitcom, if I recall correctly. And so this TV show is already at season 6, has been renewed for season 7, and there is a spin-off planned about a character that still is not here in season 1. We just wrapped up watching season 1 last night, and so we're going to start season 2 today. So obviously, The Neighborhood, it talks about a potentially very tricky topic, right?
Sure.
How I was kind of concerned that they were either going to drop the ball in terms of trying to achieve what they set out to do, or that they wouldn't do so, that they wouldn't talk about some issues gracefully, because
Sure.
like, how do you combine a sitcom and the role of a sitcom with talking about stuff like racial inequality, or like a white guy slowly coming to terms with his white privilege and understanding even what white privilege means, and why he's lived his entire life a certain way, and why his black neighbors just can't live life and go on about life like he does because of all the systemic racial issues in the United States. I thought, how are they going to do this? And let me tell you, not only do they do this with a perfect combination of comedy and grace, but also in a way that it's lighthearted, but at the same time makes you think. And especially the season 1 finale, I think it was very well done. How basically is a story, spoiler for the season 1 finale. It's basically Calvin and Dave going to this golf club, and Dave realizing, because Calvin makes him notice how at the golf club, which is mostly, attended by white people, how Calvin gets treated differently, even for the smallest things, like making a reservation at the table or keeping his hat on inside the golf club. And I thought that was really well done. And the thing about this show is that I love the comedy on this show. I think both Cedric the Entertainer and Max Greenfield have a very physical way to express comedic times that really works for me. And I also gotta give a shout out to the other leading characters, like Calvin's wife, or the two sons, Marty and Malcolm. Like, I think it's just and also like the two different types of humor, right? There's the Calvin has a very specific type of humor, and Dave has a very different type of comedy. And I think combining these two families basically together leads to a very unique product that we've been watching every night before going to sleep, and we absolutely love it. So you can watch it on CBS if you're in the United States. You can also stream it on Paramount Plus. I signed up using a VPN and my App Store account, so that's how I've been watching Paramount Plus, and I'm looking forward to digging into season 2 because I'm really in love with the characters and the idea, and sometimes this show makes you think, which is a good thing about these themes, and I love it.
Well, I think Paramount Plus owes you for going to the lengths of using a VPN, because, there are probably 5 people in America that have subscribed to Paramount Plus, Federico. I'm just teasing. I was subscribed to it a while back. I'm not currently, but this does sound really good. And I assume it's also on iTunes if you want to buy it that way too. So I don't know. I'll have to check it out this summer. I have actually 2 quick picks for you. I was looking for a movie the other night that would just be something fun to watch. Not anything thought-provoking, not anything deep at all, just fun. And I realized that Fast X was available on Amazon Prime. Fast X is the latest installment of the Fast and Furious franchise. And I started this movie, and I was watching. I didn't really pay much attention to like how long the movie was supposed to be. And, I don't usually think of Fast and Furious movies as long movies. They tend to be like one long car chase. And it just kept going and going. And I was starting to think about going to bed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a 2 hour and 15-minute movie, which is a lot for a movie like this, I think. And so I actually watched this in 2 chunks. It is a movie that is very true to itself in the sense that the acting's not very good. That really isn't in any of the Fast and Furious movies. But the car chases and the stunts and the wild stuff that goes on is just amazing. Driving cars out of airplanes and landing them on a highway, and the explosions and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. One of the things that happens at the beginning is that the bad guy, he's trying to get back at the Fast and Furious crew. And so he's got this elaborate plot to ruin their lives and turn people against them. And they start out in Rome, and they're chasing cars through the streets of Rome. And there's a bomb rolling through the streets of Rome, a giant bomb that, the main character ends up, Dom, it's rolling straight for the Vatican. And he manages to push it off into the river before it gets to, St. Peter's Square, which saves the Vatican and saves lots of people, but it still blows up and it destroys a big part of Rome. And that's kind of where it starts, with them getting blamed for this disaster in Italy. And it goes on from there. And it's just one of those movies that's incredibly fun to watch because there's so much action. And what I will spoil, I guess, is that it's a cliffhanger. The 2 hours and 15 minutes wasn't enough. Apparently there's more. It ends up in a total cliffhanger at 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I believe the next installment is due to come out next year, I believe. So, go for it. It's a lot. It's a fun way to spend an afternoon or an evening just hearing a lot of loud explosions and watching some cool cars drive around fast all over the world. It's not just Italy. It's all sorts of places. And I enjoyed it a lot. They were in southern Italy at one point in the movie too. So that's that. And the other one I want to mention is, I mentioned this in connection with our MacStories Unwind playlist, which I think since we last spoke, I maybe added a song or two too. But I've got, I think, one song from this artist on that playlist, but I have been tempted to put 3 or 4 because The Sweater Club by Jelani Arya is probably my favorite album of the year so far. It's really, really good. It's a very deep album in terms of quality singles on there from top to bottom. And I found myself just sitting and listening to it over and over again on repeat. If you've listened to that song on the MacStories Unwind podcast, I forget which one I have on there, but if you listen to it and you enjoy that song, I would suggest listening to the entire album because top to bottom, every one of them's a banger, I think. So that's all I have for this week, Federico.
Very nice.
All right, everybody. That's a nice, tight MacStories Unwind for this Thursday and Friday. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. That's where we write and do other things. You can also find us on Mastodon. Federico is at Vitici, and I'm at John Voorhees. Just go to vitici.macstories.net and to johnvoorhees.macstories.net to find us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.